Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is a video about the new ambiguously worded and kind of confusing patch notes that we got for the new Crucible League, A Path of Exile. Please keep in mind that this is all based off of a trade league player's perspective, somebody who doesn't really play hardcore or SSF. So take that as you will. I'm going to kind of be going over how this would affect a trade league's player's experience in the coming months here. So the first thing I wanted to bring up was Breach, because I think that the price of the lower level breaches are going to go up, and the price of flawless breach stones are going to go down. I also think that the price of Ulnatol's amulet is probably going to go down, as well as the fractured grasping nails, because it'll be easier to farm the flawless ones in particular and be able to grind the Chayula's flawless for those hotly sought after uniques. That being said, it does make Breach a much more profitable farming strategy this time around, I do think. But I do also want to point out that for campaign runners, specifically on like TFT, the people who power level players through the game and run rotas, for example, will have a harder time being able to kind of boost a player's experience points from level 60 to 70, because before it was very easy to run the level 70 breaches over and over again to help boost a completed player's, say a player has beaten the axe by a power leveler. They would typically take them into breach stones to get them from that level 60 to 70 if they've requested that, or even if they complete a campaign without reaching the quota of, say, I guarantee you level 60 when you finish the campaign. Now, it might be a little harder to achieve that, and you might have to kind of farm the act areas a little more before you can get into the breach stones. It also makes it harder for players who level by themselves. Say they're leveling a second or third character, and they have all the gear, they have all the resources to get their character from level 1 to, say, 80. It might be harder in that little gap area of level 60 to 80 to fill with breach stones. Now, that could be a healthy thing for the community, that could be a negative thing. Again, is a super ambiguous kind of league. The way everything seems to be shaping out, you can't really tell if anything's good or if anything's bad, because it's so different. They've just made different changes and rebalances. Not much of this is explicitly a nerf or a buff. It's kind of hard to tell what the outcome's going to be. And I think that's kind of confusing a lot of the trade league community in particular. So moving on, I wanted to talk about the Abyss changes. So with Abyss, I feel like the Stygian Spires is like, yeah, that's cool. It makes, like, Abyssal Troves were basically something you open and then walk away from. You barely ever pick up anything that comes out of an Abyssal Trove. I feel like with the Stygian Spires, at least you'll be wanting to pick up the Stygian Vices, especially if you get the base item level higher, because those actually do sell and people do like using those, and they're great for crafting. But that being said, the specifically in Trade League, I must say, the Abyssal Depths, where you fight the Lich in particular, were not profitable. Even if you got liches, like, people just did not want them. They would rather they have higher pack size and more holes to open, so that they can get higher or more drops in their map instead of actually getting the boss drops. Because the boss drop would typically be like a 1 chaos pair of boots, or a 1 chaos Stygian Vice. It's item level 75. Like, it was horrible. So again, this is kind of ambiguous in the sense that maybe with the fact that Abyssal Depths now always spawn a Lich, that might actually make the price even worse for the uniques that it's dropping. That also being said, I don't think like the price of Stygian Vices are going to go down as well. I think crafting on Stygian Vice is going to be a lot easier. Bases are going to drop in price. I really do think that this actually just hurts Abyss in the long run. And I think that these changes are actually going to make Abyss worse than it actually even was before. Again, we'll see. I mean, reading these patch notes, it doesn't seem like it's a good thing for Trade League. I think for solo self-found, this is very good. I think this gives you a huge reason, like it gives you way higher consistency on getting a good belt for your build. And I think that's important because it's felt like in SSF you were constantly having to chase farm a Mage Blood and then gamble, or an Apothecary card and gamble it into a Mage Blood. And otherwise, like, no other belt really was worth putting that much time into the farm. Even if you got like good Stygian Vices, I feel like typically you would go and run like Heist and get the or you would run Temples and you would get like the experimental belts, and those were typically better than Stygian Vices while you were working into a Mage Blood. So for SSF, I think this is better. I think for, again, this is coming from somebody who doesn't play a lot of SSF, but I think for Trade League, it's not going to be very great. But again, we'll see. Moving on, I have something else here. The Brawny Battle Mage, the Doctor, the Incantation, the Witch can now be found in the Putrid Cloister, Sepulchre, Waste Pool, and Phantasmagoria maps. So I think that the Putrid Cloister, which was selling at about 34 chaos at the end of this league, is going to be worth even more now that the Doctor can drop in it. I'm gonna guess 50 to 60 chaos maybe now for Putrid Cloister, which is great for people who open stack decks for the Inventor cards, I think is what they're called, because those are 4-1 Putrid Cloister, so that's very nice. I think in general, having more locations that the Doctor can spawn. I think in this last league, the Doctor had, I want to say, had two locations, maybe three, but now it's got 4 with the Putrid Cloister, so that's exciting. And yeah, I think that's very good for the Putrid Cloister. Moving on, we have stun recovery mastery types. And okay, so this was kind of me going over masteries in general. So the way I feel about the masteries is they've made so many changes to the masteries. Like, look at all these changes. They've made an abundant amount of changes to the masteries. And I think that this is going to lead to a lot of new builds, obviously. But a lot of builds are also falling out because they removed a bunch of masteries. I think one of the notable ones is like, I think they removed damage per intelligence. I'm pretty sure in caster they removed, 1% increased spell damage per 16 int. Like, that's a big one to lose. Among a few others, there are ones that are for shields, for like spectral shield throw. The precision remove mastery for reservation, determination reservation. Like, they removed a lot of the Defiance banner reservation. They removed a ton of the reservation, which is going to make Aura Stacker a little harder to build. But they've also added a lot of very powerful masteries. So the way I feel is that the mastery changes is kind of like how they did the jewel changes in the leagues before, where they took out something that people really liked, but they also added things that people really liked. So we'll see how this kind of affects it, affects the community, and how this affects builds overall. But something tells me that this is going to be kind of a mixed review area, and I think generally that's what we're getting off of this league, is a mixed review based off the patch notes, which is why I keep going back to this word ambiguous. It's so hard to tell if this is going to be a good or bad league. I really couldn't tell you. What I do know is, based off what I'm looking at, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad coming, and yeah, that's just the nature of a rebalance, I guess, in that sense. So something else I wanted to bring up was, it's not coming up. Great, I'm gonna go scroll for it. Saboteur, here it is. So I wanted to bring up that Saboteur got the cooldown recovery rate ascendancy, which is interesting. It'll be interesting to see if cast on crit builds move more into Saboteur instead of, I think people were using Occultist and Trickster before. now people might be moving into Saboteur to try that out with the cooldown recovery, because that is a really big power rate. Plus the two trigger bots, the new trigger bot uh, passive, I think is very interesting. And I think people will be able to find some seriously good builds doing this. Um, like, I know Cast on Crit Fireball with Nimbus was very interesting yet experimental last league, and I think that based off of this change, plus there was a change about how Nimbus is working with projectiles, which I won't get into, but there is like some changes to how projectiles returning to you are going to function moving forward that have made Fireball a lot better. I think Cast Anchor Fireball is actually going to be even better than it was this previous league in the new league. Next, I wanted to quickly bring up Pathfinder. Playing in Trade League, Pathfinder is a class that I steer far away from, and I think most people do unless you're playing concoction builds. But I know a lot of people that did heist farming would run Pathfinder for the increased movement speed uh, passives, which they've nuked Nature's Adrenaline. It now causes Flask to gain 3 charges every 3 seconds. We could see new Flask bots, Flask Aura bots running Pathfinder, which is like cool, dude, but it's something that I'm not gonna do. But yeah, heist farming with a Pathfinder, you're better off running Raider, I think, at this point. Sorry to say, Pathfinder doesn't see a lot of love these days. And then I've got another note here. Yes, the bow based leveling. So what did I want to say about this? Oh, so actually this was kind of a general player balance thing that I wanted to go over. Yeah, so this was based off of early leveling in general. So the way I see it is the changes that they've made to the early game leveling and skills in the early game, I think is specifically targeting racing and SSF hardcore racing in particular to make certain builds more competitive and other builds less competitive. I think that's why we see like the things like the removal of onslaught. I think certain skill adjustments. I think in the long run will be good for racing. I think in general for Trade League, this is near irrelevant. It's not going to make much of a difference in your league start. Most people will, truck through or power through whatever the early game throws at them. Like, that's just something you have to do when you're doing softcore trade. It's not something that you're like too worried about. You just, if you can complete it, that's what matters. But for a hardcore and solo self found, this is definitely a huge difference. And I think it's going to make it for a little more exciting racing events. The next thing I wanted to go over was the synthesis changes. The fact that they removed bow attack, fire, additional arrow on synthesis implicits is very interesting. No longer being able to roll this means that mirror bows, mirror quivers that are currently in standard with this on it are going to go way up. I think that this overall is good for future leagues because you basically couldn't have like a best bow or a good bow without having the synthesis implicit on it. And, you couldn't get the synthesis implicit on a good crafted bow unless you were mirroring it. So, yeah, this is very healthy for the community as a whole and overall. Ruthless, yeah, no one cares. Bug fixes. The last thing I want to go over was the Kirok changes. In particular, they removed Harbingers and they added Ambush. So I think that the remove of Harbinger is going to be interesting. I think it'll make Harbinger nodes a little more needed on the tree if you're doing something like farming for fracturing orbs. But I think adding the strong boxes as because I don't believe this last league we had ambush as an option. I think the additional strong boxes is going to make Magic Find a little better. because that, getting those extra strong boxes for improved quant in a apothecary farming strategy is a big deal. We also got the smuggler's caches for 6 chaos, which is big for heisters. And then we got essence. I think essence was there last time as well. Metamorph, no one's ever going to use. Abyss, no one's ever going to use. Expedition, maybe people use that, especially if you have a tree that's like built for doing expedition and farming logbooks. That might be profitable. I haven't farmed expedition since 3.18, so I can't really tell you if that's profitable anymore. 12 chaos for the sacred grove. That's interesting because I think this is going to make scarab guild or winged scarab farming more profitable than it already was before. You no longer have to run the sextant that says your areas contain a sacred grove. Now you can pay 12 chaos on your harvest. Uh, of course, you're getting rid of fortune favors the brave, so you have to maybe adjust. But I think overall, if you can get a good pack size increase through that extra sextant slot that you now have, that this could be a huge upgrade for the winged scarab farming strategy. But yeah, that's generally what I wanted to go over and kind of just, uh, rant and ramble and vocally vomit out into the YouTube environment. I'm just kind of curious to hear everyone's thoughts. And yeah, I would say this is the most ambiguous thing on the planet. We're going to see what happens. Um, there's a lot of really weird stuff going on this league, a lot of really weird changes. But I've been challenged by Arrow to do the Spectral Shield Throw Trickster builds. So uh, I guess that's what I'm doing for my league start. So you can catch me doing that, even though after seeing these changes, uh, yeah, I honestly think Spectral Shield Throw will still be fine. And shout out to Arrow. I doubt he sees this, but maybe I'll send him the link or something. I don't know. Yeah, go check out Arrow's channel and tell him he's a bastard for having so many Shadow class characters on his league starter wheel. But with that being said, everyone take care and thanks for checking me out. I'll see you in the league. Peace out.